Thank you so much. So exciting to be here, exciting to moderate this session today with you all, esteemed panelists. Thank you all for joining me. I'd love it if you all would just do a quick intro of your role, and more importantly, your role in, I'll say, like, let's leverage the title in orchestrating the future of life insurance, because the four of us don't come together up here on the stage to just talk the talk. We live this, we've been living this for decades. We aspire every morning we get up to move the momentum towards where the future needs to be. And that's one of my favorite things about getting to moderate this panel with you. Maybe Sashay, we'll start with you.
All right, so I'm the lucky one. Hello, fellow humans. So I lead the Global Technology and Client Services Organization at TIA. We are one of the largest retirement annuities providers in the United States, and globally we have an asset management firm called Nuveen that manages $1.3 trillion in AUM.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Russell Higginbotham. I'm the CEO of Swiss Re's Solutions Division. What that is, it's a relatively new venture where Swiss Re looks to bring its risk knowledge assets to the market in a different way. So rather than as a risk transfer, it's actually we bring knowledge to our clients, whoever they may be, to help them on the insurance journey. So everywhere through the insurance value chain, whether it's product design, underwriting, portfolio management through to claims, we try and bring a good answer to our clients.
Good morning, everyone. Need to get the room to be a little bit more lively. I'll do this once more.
We need Gary Vaynerchuk to walk in.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Let's get a good morning from everyone. Excellent. That's awesome. I'm Dev Ganguly, Chief Operating Officer of Jackson National. We are one of the leading annuity manufacturers in the country. The main reason I am here is I'm passionate about advisor and consumer experiences. I can talk about it all day.
Morning, everyone. My name is Manish Chaudhary. I head the global insurance business for TechM. Why I'm here is largely because of the unprecedented change that's happening across life, right? The demographic change, the carriers, the problems they're grappling with. We tend to work with large carriers, helping them orchestrate solutions, manage innovation, and help them through the transformation journey. Extremely passionate about insurance and happy to be here.
Thank you all for being here. And Lisa Wardlaw, I spent 28 years in the insurance industry, hailing from Munich Re, Farmers, Zurich, ING Voya, heavily focused in retirement, life and annuities. Ran a lot of the transformation at Munich in the life and annuity space, and now I am a consultant and I support people on that. I call it organ rejection, where we're trying to do innovation. We've got a healthy body, healthy organ, and sometimes it rejects. And so I really help people try to extend beyond the next phase. And so as we think about innovation in life and health, we often think about things like technology, or things like innovation, or things like digitalization. And of course, now we think about all things AI. But what it really comes down to is how are we reinventing the consumer engagement and the consumer experience? Because over the last day and a half, what we've really talked about is technology really should be the moment that you don't notice. It should be the moment that creates this, I'll quote Marie Kondo for anybody who studies Marie Kondo, this moment that sparks joy in an unanticipated way, right? It was a frictionless experience. And so I think there's so much going on with the wealth transfer that we're about to experience, the post-pandemic reactions that everyone's living through, the annuities on the uptick, the interest rate environment, the macro conditions, the legacy technology, the fact that we're actually so siloed in the way we go to market with protection products, right, Debbie and I were talking about this coincidentally before. But let's start off with the heart, which is the consumer personalized product offerings and engagement. And Russell, I'm gonna take this one over to you first, if you don't mind. How do we think about leveraging, and I wanna use the word personalized, not in a hype or overused way, but in a way that actually knows the customer and the consumer. What are the trends that we're seeing in this market? Based on your experiences, where do you think we need to go? And then what are some of the key lessons that you have learned and are applying? Because clearly you see data that's totally different.
Yeah, I hope everyone can hear you, because you seem hardly, yeah. So So the question was, how can we bring better personalization to the world of insurance? And I think for me it's exactly the right question. So if you go back a little bit in time, what the insurance industry has done in the recent years is to reinvent itself in terms of its technology platform and how it interacts with customers. I think that's very much the case on the non-life side. Life and health is a bit more difficult because you have these big legacy problems, but even from a new business perspective, I think digitalization has been a topic, and the pandemic accelerated that. So I think what you could say is, by and large, across the insurance industry, the platform that we have to engage with customers is good, generally. It's more efficient, it's faster, and it does engage in the right sort of ways. And we start to see this topic of personalization, you start to see it come through in certain areas. So like underwriting, for example. So I know that's not a product, but just in terms of underwriting, with the electronic health records being more prevalent, actually underwriting can be much more targeted. So historically, everyone gets asked, fill in the same form, and there are pages and pages and pages that are irrelevant, right? And you get quizzed on things that are not necessarily relevant to you as well. So I think things like electronic health records and machine learning allow organizations to start targeting their underwriting in the right sort of way. So I think that's a sort of a starting point. The same happens with claims. But then you move on to products and propositions, and I would say it's not really there yet. So if I used to run our business in Asia, and on the life and health side, there are how this personalization comes actually is not in the way you mean, but in a way with very, very complicated products with lots of options and lots of riders and lots of things you can select. So it's personalized, but from a menu. And what I would probably say is, at the end of that process, a lot of customers probably don't really know what they've actually.
It's called intimidation opt-out.
Well, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say.
No,
yeah,
but you're right.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to do, but so I think the platforms that we have and the data that's available, and the technology that we have around that, particularly AI, which we have to mention in every single conversation these days, puts us in a position to be able to offer personalized products, propositions. What I would say, just as a sort of word of almost like caution, or before we get too excited about running out on this personalization, before anyone's going to buy anything, they have to be aware of the risks that they face, and they have to be motivated to do something about it. So I think there's a sort of a fundamental building block that you need to bring in before you start to think of solutions. And I guess something like the pandemic was an interesting one for that, because when the pandemic was up and running, people's awareness of health insurance called different things in different markets, health insurance, medical insurance, was much, much higher. And people's propensity to buy the product was much, much higher. And their willingness to dig into what the product covered was much, much higher. So rather than just choosing the cheapest one in the market, people were interested in the actual coverage and what they were going to get. And they also weren't so interested in getting a check to compensate them for something. They were interested in access to services, access to goods, even really basic things. Access to hand sanitizer and masks at that point of time was amongst people's top. So understanding, the raising of awareness, but then understanding the customer needs throughout that, I would say is the first step towards product sort of customization. Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that people couldn't hear my question. I don't usually need to be mic'd, so I'm glad that you heard my question. But I think that, and I spent a lot of time back in the original days of how we get from those 20-page forms down to 12, the 12 questions we can all ask in under 3 minutes, right? But more importantly, also like going fluidless, like before COVID, how do we go fluidless? But I think there's something very deep-rooted in what you're saying, which is you have to know that individual. Is someone, for example, very fact-oriented? And how Sasha, I'd love to hear your, Dev, and Manish's reaction to this. Are you a fact-oriented person? Do you have to know the full picture? Or are you somebody that when you look at things, I was talking to some women last night at dinner, and what we were talking about is like retirement planning. It's so funny. And it's like, when you download all your receipts and you look at what you spend on your wine club, maybe you don't want to see that, right? And so personalization gets into well beyond to your point, a menu cart of products, and it gets into very much in the depth of psychological, like, and everybody's going to be unique in this sense. Everybody's going to be slightly different. So I'd love to hear from the rest of you on the customer experience and personalization and where you see the trends going. And maybe Sasha, since I just ticked that one over, I'll kick it over to you.
Absolutely. I think, kind of building up on Russell's point, right? So personalization starts with people first, and then all these platforms and processes that we have. And if you look at any of these companies that we represent here, I mean, these are 100-year-old companies. The industry is probably one of the oldest industries, insurance. So it's pretty hard to overnight get into a personalization where everybody that you're touching actually feels that personalization, right? So for instance, in the retirement industry, if I look at it, we deal with different generations. Pretty much we have retirees who are decumulating their wealth through, obviously in our case, annuities products, to Gen Z who's just beginning their journey to retire, to accumulate. Now everybody in between. So like when you talk to a Gen Z customer, the personalization is astronomically different from somebody who probably doesn't want to actually use their phone or computer to have a digital interaction. So we could talk quite a bit about digital transformation, but for them, the digital transformation is when they actually call or when they sit down with a person and have a financial advice conversation. How is technology and digital enabling that level of personalization? So how do you get these different vintages of customers, processes, the platforms that we have transform in a way that actually takes it to the next level while this whole massive technology shift that's happening? So I think that's frankly what makes it really exciting. So personalization is quite dramatically different, right? If you look at every segment that you're working with. And you mentioned generational wealth and the transition. We expect people to live longer now. So that's going to be pretty dramatically, having an impact on what we think about personalization and digital transformation in that journey.
Right. I think I read a story published in InsurTech Insights, I think covered it, but it was a Capgemini report, and I'm sure you gentlemen know these stats very well, but just for the audience who may or may not know this, the largest generational wealth transfer we will ever experience is coming by 2040.
That's right.
That's just shocking if you think about it. Like, and I just want to amplify, like we've never experienced. It's not that we're up against this new wealth transfer, here it comes. It's like that we've never experienced as a society. And so creating those, and Dev, I know you're passionate about this too. How do you think that we need to be thinking beyond, I call it our day-to-day? Like, how do we weave this in?
So I'll leave this audience with one thing from me. Instead of, first of all, Sastri, I agree, most of us have been there for decades, right? But that's also our challenge. Insurance is kind of its own ecosystem. Wealth management is kind of its own ecosystem. And we look at things from a product standpoint. If we can flip that model and look at it from a customer experience standpoint, that outside in, if I ask you to raise your hand and say, who would want to buy an annuity? Not many hands may not go up,
I'm
right?
going to raise my hand.
Yeah, that's great. But if I ask you this question, when you are at an age where pensions have run out, most companies are not providing pensions, where 401ks are not going to be enough, but you would have a lifetime check which will grow if equity markets do better, right? A lot more hands will go up. At the end of the day, a customer or an advisor is trying to solve a real need, a financial plan need, a goal need, a need to have that second home in retirement, a need to fulfill the kids' education fund, a need to make sure that with all the medical advances, if we live till 95, we don't run out of money, right? But product companies still, generally speaking, look at it at product out versus needs in. So I think if as an industry, we can flip that model where we start looking at it from that goals and needs in, we will make a dent in the universe. So that's why I'm so passionate about it, is I feel like we need to flip that model and bring the two ecosystems of wealth management and insurance together.
So let's take that down another level, because what would a conversation be if we didn't talk about data and AI strategy, right? Because you can't, well, first of all, it is actually really foundational, and we can be very intentional, and we'll come back to you on this point, Manish, like how we use tools that are fit for purpose. But Sastry, maybe if you can kind of think through and take us, the audience, through your journey on how you all are thinking about embracing AI in the business. What are the top challenges as we think about retirement, as we think about income planning? You would think that the tooling can enable much more sophisticated scenarios, much more sophisticated ways that we can understand things. Again, at dinner last night, there was this person that said, well, I thought I would be retired by now when I did this 20 years ago. But clearly now I'm definitely not. And so how are you thinking about that in your role? And then, I always like to ask people, like, what are the really lessons that you're learning in terms of advanced analytics and how you're applying those? And then, of course, I'd like to hear feedback.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's a pleasure to be at the InsurTech conference always, right? Because I used to come here when I was at Marsh & McLennan, and I was on these panels, and the same question was asked back then, like, what do you think about data and AI, and how is it changing? Cyber insurance or pandemic insurance, or how do we put wearables for like real-time risk management solutions, et cetera. If I look back now, like just literally 5-6 years ago, and look at the landscape now, that question has a completely different context and a very different meaning. And we should all acknowledge that. AI, of course, is a big buzzword, and we like throwing it around now more than we ever did, but we were throwing that around even in the past, right? So data and analytics. So just some stats for you first. When I think about the retirement and kind of building on Dave's point, in the United States, 40% of households will not have enough to retire. And that is in the current state. And we expect this is the first time in the history of mankind where people above 65 are going to live much longer than they ever lived before. So you compound that, and that's a pretty dramatic state to live in. Second, women are going to expected to have 30% less in their retirement income compared to men. 54% of Black Americans won't have enough retirement. So when you look at these type of stats, right, it is pretty, challenging, but that's where I think the data and AI solutions really come into play. So in our ecosystem, I'll give you a couple of examples. So I talked about the different generations that we deal with, right? So we've deployed AI now at full scale in all of our client services organization. That's one thing, good to have technology and all of client services in the same organization, because I could just cook here and feed my family on the other side. But every call, this is millions of participants that are calling us, they're now catered to with enriched conversations with AI. We have a strategic partnership with Google, as an example. We have a few InsurTech companies actually that we're working with in that ecosystem. But now you get into generative AI. Obviously there's a lot of quotes flying around, but my favorite one is humans with AI will take over humans without AI. Yeah. So how do we actually give that AI solution? And I don't know who quoted it, but credit goes to that person. But it's fantastic to see that from that lens, right? Like, how do you actually put these AI solutions, especially generative AI? So as an example, and I will ask all of you when you take the break, go to tia.org, go to the website, and in a search bar, just search for anything like, what is a rollover? What is the difference between traditional and a Roth IRA? You will see the search results that are displayed in a traditional context, which is what we normally did. We just implemented our generative AI solution on the website to show to audience how it is different. So you will actually see an extremely intuitive set of answers for the same question that is generated by AI. And that is just to demonstrate the power of generative AI. So I think I'm quite excited. There's going to be a lot of buzz. We're going to have this whole hype curve. But in the end, as Bill Gates always quoted, we always overestimate the change that's going to happen in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that's going to happen in the next 10 years. So 10 years from now, when we look back in a conversation like this, we would actually feel quite proud about the progress we made as an industry.
Well, I think that's, first of all, amazing to see, because I think it's very fit for purpose. Like, how are we addressing the personalization that you all are talking about, and how are we doing it in ways that are not wait and see, right? Like we need to be conscientious, but we also, and Manish, this is kind of like coming over to you now, conscientious about what we're doing. I was talking yesterday about sustainability and ethical machine learning and AI for life insurance. Like, how do we do that? Manish, how do you see the foundations? Like, what foundations do companies need to have in place? Because you kind of see it from the back end, if you will, from the boiler room. Like, how do I put all this together? How do I weave it together? And what are people really dealing with? Because my guess is, from having worked at a few carriers here and there, that the foundations aren't always as they need to be, but you can't avoid, you can't wait to help solve the customer's need, right? Like, how are you seeing that evolve?
That's very true, right? So, and to Shastri's point, right, we are seeing a huge opportunity around AI. It's the most profound technology change that's coming. And it's more around augmentation of people rather than replacement of people, right? And that augmentation, the level of efficiency that can happen is tremendous. Almost every organization you talk to, Gen AI is the top point of topic today, right? But the foundational capabilities, just the data foundation, is missing across the board, right? Is your data fit for purpose? It is contextual. Is it available at the right time, in the right shape? In most organizations, especially life and annuity carriers, it isn't, right? Basics of those data because most of your business process data is sitting in legacy systems. And to liberate that data and get it consumable for machine learning, for everything else, is still a lot of work that needs to be done, right? So that is where I think a lot of organizations will need to put their energy in driving that change and really transforming the underlying estate.
So let's extend that to, we were talking about the front end, we were talking about the, kind of products, like from like a menu card of products into more like intuitive product. And Russell, you said something that's just resonating with me and just kind of sticking with me, which is, well, you have to understand kind of yourself. You have to understand your health, your journey, where you're going to be. And clearly we don't all have no one has a crystal ball like that, but there's so many ways that we do monitor our wellness now in ways, I'm wearing one of them, in ways that we didn't monitor before. How do you think about, and I want all four of you to kind of weigh in on this, how do we take the concept of wearables, not just from do you qualify for XYZ protection product, but in the concept of how does the person know and understand, on one hand, how can I improve my longevity? And on the other hand, like, what might be right for me, right? Like, and Russell, I'll start with you on that, because I know you're doing a lot of work in that area.
Yeah, so life insurance is the world's most simple contract, right? Theoretically. And it's also an insurance contract where the policyholder and the insurer are completely aligned. Policyholder doesn't want to die, insurer doesn't want you to die either, right?
It's in everyone's best interest for everyone to live.
It's perfectly aligned like that. But until relatively recently, the relationship between the policyholder and the insurer is very heavy at the front end, this underwriting process that people go through, and then eventually you get a policy issued, and then for 25 years, then nothing. Right? Which isn't that the most bizarre thing? And then the only time you're in touch is if you're maybe changing bank account or changing address, or ultimately at the end making a claim. So actually the advent of whether it's wearables or whether it's other advice that goes to help people improve their health and well-being is completely logical. But then it comes back to the question around individual understanding and preferences. Not as many people as you think will then take a wearable and use it consistently for a long, long period of time. There's only a certain sector of the market.
I have no idea what he's saying about me, and I'm joking.
Right,
no,
well,
I know, you're right.
We've all been there, right?
Or we all do it for at least 90 days at the beginning of the year.
Exactly, exactly. So I think it's, again, thinking about personalization and thinking about segments of market. I think you touched upon generations, we touched upon personality types, you talk about culture. I mean, it's endless. But so then the propensity to want to have an Apple Watch, use it consistently, and have it related to your insurance policy, it's a certain sector of the population will be interested in that, but the majority, you have to find different ways to reach them.
Yeah. Oh, and anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I think it has to be more intuitive, right? So a lot of carriers would do the Oura Ring or something else, or the Apples or Fitbits, but the participant experience isn't controlled by the participant, right? You may not want an Oura Ring, you might want an Apple Watch, or you want a Fitbit. So for the participant to choose their behavior and what device works for them, if that is easier, then the adoption is much higher, right? If you send them a Fitbit, but they don't want to use a Fitbit, then that whole exercise doesn't give you the results you want.
So Manish, can I just take that for just a minute into kind of tech for just 1 second while you're there? Hold, please, for this one. I think one observation I have in the industry and in the roles I was working in, and when I hear you say this, is a lot of people pick like a path for their consumer because we productize it. And we say something like, oh, well, the Fitbit's out, or the Apple Watch is out, or now which I love Oura Ring, now the Oura Ring, or, whatever. Now we can study your sleep with Hatch, or, like, you name it, it's out there. And to the point, there's hundreds of thousands of high fidelity, meaning like actual devices, and there's low fidelity, which are things that we can get, like, from your phone, we know when you wake up because when you check. Anyway, that being said, a lot of companies kind of double down on a couple of these things, almost to your point, choosing for the customer. But you may need the ability to interoperate with hundreds, if not thousands of, I'll say, consumer-driven choice. How do you think about that from the tech side? And then I'd love to hear your thoughts about that from, I think where we started this was, let's pick a few. And depending on where you were, you may have picked more than a few, I'm not saying, right? How do you think about that in terms of creating the foundation of the future?
I think it's just the open ecosystem, and the technology is out there. It's not that the technology isn't available. It's how you embrace that technology and incorporate that within your own organization and your enterprise IT. I think that's where the challenge is, right? Anything we want to do today, there is no dearth of technology and options and ability to integrate it, right? It is largely the organizations, their own, how do you think of your customer first, right? A lot of times you're still focused on, when you're developing a new product, you're still focused on what your tech stack is and where you're going rather than the customer first and what makes sense for the customer, right? So if you design for experiences, it's easy to do everything else, right?
Yeah, I'd love to hear you.
I'll keep it short. I think we all need to move to a co-opetition model than a competition model, right? So the world of ecosystem is here and here to stay, right? Won't get technical with APIs and data exchanges, but the more we can all partner, right, and truly create that differentiated experiences for advisor and customers, the pie will grow. Like Sastry said, right, there is a huge amount of assets which are up for grabs and up for protection and other things. So I don't think any of us are going to have an issue with not having the assets to go after. Where we will have an issue is if as an industry we cannot solve for the customer experiences like you talked about, and that customer experiences could be wearables, like you said, in the more day-to-day stuff, or it could be their iPhone experience on their wealth ecosystem, right? Everyone wants to now check their net worth. Everyone wants to check their guarantees. Everyone wants to check what that projected decumulation income is going to look like, right? We as an economy has been focused very much on accumulation, right? We all have been accumulating wealth, but you have to reach a point where you look at what does from 65 to 95 my monthly check looks like, right? And I would love to track that. So those things are coming, but that's possible only if we all work together and we work in a co-opetition world.
I think that's the second time in 1 week I've heard that word. So it's definitely, I think, word of definitely will be coming 2024.
Yeah.
How do you think of this?
Yeah, I think, I'll bring on Dave's response, right? So in our case, we believe in financial health, obviously. So, and then the mission, we call it, internally in the retirement industry, we call it the mission metric. So how are you tracking, to your point, Dave, on your financial goals? But just kind of stepping back, right? It is the same customer that's getting bombarded by numerous financial institutions any given day. We all are, right? So numerous devices, numerous channels, and AI is going to make that problem at least 100 times worse. So how much do you expect one human being to, in their wake-up hours, to deal with all kinds of stuff, signals, data, extractions, messaging, and all that stuff? So ultimately what happens is, what is the basic stuff that a simple human being would look for when they retire, right? So In our case, in fact, we just featured a story where there is a 90-plus-year-old retiree who has been taking a lifetime income paycheck for the last 35 years, who just run a marathon for the senior citizens. So now you bring your point on like life and health and wealth together. At the end of the day, for this participant, it's pretty simple, which is he wants to live longer, he wants to stay healthy, and he wants to continue to get the financial check. So every experience, and he doesn't want to be bothered by us, by all these different institutions in here, right? So how do you actually, every interaction that you have, how do you take that as a very rich opportunity compared to a Gen Z who's like 2 devices on, 5 things on, and then boom, 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 boom. Well, okay, that's completely different to your point, Russell. I mean, we can probably take more risk with those customers, but at the end of the day, we have to serve all of them, right? So that's kind of how I think about this problem.
Russell, are you seeing anything on that specific lens on how we can have the foundation? I mean, and like, is Swiss Re looking at how you support, of course you are with solutions, like how you support carriers being more, I don't want to just say tech-enabled, but bringing to them things that may be disparate in the back end that you all can help solve with more solutions, not just risk transfer?
Yeah, so our mission, the company strapline of Swiss Re is to make the world more resilient. And the phrase protection gap was, I think we invented that way back when. And our objective is to try and close that protection gap and get good quality insurance products into the hands of more people at the right time. So that's kind of what we do, and then we do that through product design. We do it through making underwriting more efficient. So it's the US is a tricky market for underwriting because you said about the fluids and so on. If you look at some of the Asian markets, the straight-through processing rate through electronic underwriting platforms is getting above 90% now. So that underwriting thing is not a topic. And like I said, with electronic health records, you ask fewer questions. So actually, it's just no longer a barrier for the vast majority of people. So I think these things are making it easier. But I do come back, and I don't want to keep laboring the point, but until people have that awareness of risk,
right?
And that you have to, you talk about accumulation products. If you suddenly get aware of that at age 55, you've kind of left it a bit late in the game, right? So, so it's trying to get that knowledge into people's mind, and just as you were saying, push it up the priority list at that right point of time.
Well, I think I want to get now to the kind of advisor network and kind of how, Dev, I'm pointing at you because I want to get down into the kind of how we think about annuities and the advisor network and the self-serve concept. I'm not saying, by the way, that people won't want advisors and curated, like even me, I like to book my flights online, but when something's not going right, I'm like, help, like I want to talk to a person, right? But we have gotten into a world of wellness self-serve. Lots of I want to be the CEO of my own health, right? I want to wellness focus on, which is connected to lifestyle, which is connected to longevity, which is connected to retirement, like how long I'm going to live connects to all these things. So how are you thinking about, and let's bring regulation in just a little bit here, regulation, the concept of advisors, how are we enabling advisors, almost like the same question of enabling carriers, how are we enabling advisors to be where the customer needs them to be? And how are you thinking about that?
That's a great question. And there is I know we always get into the topic of regulation. It feels like there is always too much regulation, but there is a reason for that to a certain extent. One of my favorite quotes is, not mine, I stole it from someone, but it's my favorite quote is, the pace of change has never been this fast, yet it will never be this slow again. So at this exponential level of pace of change, Shastri touched upon generative AI and already what they are doing on the TIA website, right? All of us are innovating at a very fast pace. So the regulators do have a fiduciary responsibility to put some framework. So I get that completely. The challenge in our industry is it's too fragmented. We have 50 states who want to regulate, right? So the Department of Insurance for Colorado already came out with their AI regulation. We have NAIC, which wants to regulate. You have SEC, which wants to regulate. It's not a common fabric, which is where I'll again go back to my co-optation model, right? So What we have found to be effective is use industry organizations like IRI and others to start advocating and start working with the regulators versus against the regulators, right? It has actually resulted in, back to some of your self-service, right? Some of the big wins around e-delivery, e-consent, even a decade ago, to recent wins around automation of transfers, now going on to AI and stuff like that. We are seeing where we are able to influence, not to the level which we would want to, but forming that coalition or having that cooperation model amongst the insurance carriers, the distributors and others help us move in that direction. One thing I will say though is my prediction is products are going to get simpler and simpler, right? We will get to a world where the Gen Z, which Russell talked about, is not going to understand the complexity of our current variable annuity products or our current, even some of our wealth management products.
It's going to need to be like a TikTok video.
Exactly,
Right? Yeah.
exactly. So the question is, do our financial advisors get to that level, right? Like Sastry said, right, the best AI is AI with a person. I still believe that you need a financial advisor just like you need a doctor. You cannot just, especially when you have meaningful wealth, you cannot just do it all through Robinhood. But the financial advisor will also have to adapt and get through that digital journey. So it's a huge change for all of us from that standpoint. And I would say the more we partner with regulators and more the third parties and the fintech and some of the InsurTech providers here, right, try to understand that, the better it would be for all of us.
So super, like all of this is so woven, right? You can't do one of these without the other. I mean, you know, I often think of it as like horses like lining up to run a race. And I think one of the things that we've done, and Manish is going to get into the tech stack, we're like, we kind of launch one out at a time. And we, you know, like you got to crawl, walk, run, you got to focus, you got to be able to, you know, tangibly execute, you got to get ROI, all the things we need to do, by the way, all the things we need to do. But sometimes we have to actually run the race, which is you have to let multiple things out at once in a, like you need to put the right, I'm using this reference because we're in Vegas. You have to put the right horses on the track to run the race. And so how do we think about tech burden, right? Life and health and annuities is not known for standardized technology stacks. I mean, we have a lot of our homegrown legacy mainframe, and to connect to what, you know, all of you have been saying is it's a multi-decade long, this business doesn't churn year over year, right? Especially the business we want. We won't talk about. Like we're long haul. So in order for us to do these movements, we're talking about lots of enforced transformation and transition. These tech projects are, you know, I raise your hand if you've ever done a life and health tech stack change. Anybody in here? Okay. Oh, like, really? No more hands.
They're already tired of it, so they can't even raise their
They're exhausted. I can't raise my hand. Halloween was only last night, people. No, but so Manish, how are we thinking about tech debt, moving it forward, and what are the enablers that people can actually take as a tangible outcome?
So if you think of it, right, US has more than 600 plus life and annuity carriers. More than 75% of them are largely legacy or Band-Aid and duct tape. Now, meaningful transformation needs a lot of funding, right? Most of the time our challenge at a business level is your funding is incremental, right? So you keep kicking the can down the road till it's no longer tenable. The biggest challenges we've seen is one is funding, the second is the talent. You know, who's going to fund it, who's going to do it? Most organizations, from a funding point of view, getting the business buy-in so that they understand what's the value that's going to create for their NPS on the customer acquisition, on new acquisitions, and getting that buy-in for the funding. So most of our advice to tech leaders is kind of look at more of the business canvas, understand your business value chain, which the business leaders can relate to, and then try and say every part of the value chain, if these are the tech changes we make, this is what's going to be the business revenue profitable impact, because that's the language everybody understands. If you say, I'm going to the cloud, it doesn't mean much, but you'll end up spending millions of dollars getting there. The second part is the tech cost is distributed across so many different layers within the organizations. It's funny, a lot of the senior leaders don't understand the total cost of ownership of the stacks they run, because it's between hardware and software and leases and people and applications and all of that stuff, right? So if you look at the entire cost of ownership for your business, there is so much waste that can be taken out, which can help fund your initiatives, right? The second part is how do you get this done? Largely is around the talent challenge is faced by everyone. To make this happen, I think the only way you can do this is collaborate, right? As industry, even collaborate across competitors, because everybody is trying to solve for the same problem. So if there are common standards which everybody can use, data, technology, it'll be far simpler and easier for you to get things done.
So I think we're running down the clock on time, and I'd love to hear if there are any questions from the audience. We have like the preeminent knowledge sharers up on stage. If anybody has any questions on this topic.
We have a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I'll just read them out and you can decide who should answer. Lisa, how do you balance personalization with risk pooling?
Personalization
With risk pooling.
I think that's a really good question, actually, because I was thinking about your point on regulation, right? And obviously with personalized data, there's going to be regulation. With AI, there's going to be regulation. The direction that regulation takes is, in many ways, in the hands of this industry in terms of how we behave. Right? So the vast majority of players want to do good, right, with the data, because there's a tremendous potential to do that. But if you only need, it's just like when you're at school, you only need one or two bad apples to do bad, and the regulation will come in quite a significant way. So actually, the availability of data gives you a chance to put better value products, and also with tech, better value products into the hands of more people. The path I always think you have to be careful around is that quite often we look to drive cost down of policies. So, your preferred, super preferred, super preferred. The other side of that coin is, for someone else, the cost is going up, because actually, if you think about it, there is a pool. So I think we have to think actually quite carefully about that as a topic, because the worst thing that we can do, other than, as well as sort of misuse of personal data, is if we as an industry are seen as driving financial exclusion, that will be a very big black mark against us, and that's when the regulator will come, and that's when these things will be taken away. So I think it's in our hands, and I think a little bit building on your point, the opportunity for the industry, I guess it's easiest to do that by market, to self-regulate and to say, these are the standards to which we hold ourselves to. That is the way the insurance industry should move forward in these areas.
Thank you. Next question. With the shift in demographics in our country, how are you innovating to reach that growing demographic of multicultural buyers without generational wealth?
Yeah, let me take that, and then Dave, maybe you should jump in on this one. I mean, this is and for those who are part of InsurTechs, this is like your biggest opportunity moment, because there is a massive generational wealth transition happening. And the demographics and ethnographics of, especially United States, has changed, and it's dramatically changing. There is different, demographics that have accumulated wealth now that's getting transitioned. So it actually creates an amazing opportunity. But so coming back to, again, experience and personalization and use of data and advisors, et cetera, this is where I would ask us to think about the steak and the sizzle. Right, so there is a complex set of problems that we need to solve within the ecosystem that will limit us, and then there is this temptation to go after the sizzle of all these crazy new things that we all want to, create. So, how do you actually get to the core of some of these underlying problems, like long contracts, different types of contracts, different things that one human actually has to, adjust to on a given day. So, the more you solve those fundamental issues, this will be similar to transition from, Industry 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0, or transition of energy industry or transition of automobile, transition of healthcare. So I think we are at a point where this wealth transition creates an opportunity for the industry to transition to the next stage. And I think that's where some interesting problems are there to solve actually for the incumbents here as well as the InsurTech companies that want to impact and grow.
Yeah, I would say again, if you attended some of these conferences, and I think Shastri, you'll remember this, 10 years ago, they said InsurTechs will replace the incumbents, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw the headline.
Yeah.
Big
That was
stage.
right there on the screen.
Yeah.
Still waiting.
Yeah.
I may have a selfie.
Yeah. And as you have seen, the best play is back to my cooperation, right? If we all work in well together as an ecosystem, one of my suggestion to the InsurTech players here would be to understand the business at a little bit more depth than some of the challenges the incumbents face. And one of my suggestions to the incumbents would be to experiment more, right? I always say we need to fail small, fail fast, fail forward, right? And as incumbents, sometimes we don't do that. We always want to have those big monolithic goals, which we want to, right? So we can learn a lot from the InsurTechs on being able to be nimble and adaptive. But same thing goes for the InsurTech. I think there is a lot of complexity in this business, which there are actual reasons for it. It's not just because the incumbents wanted to make it complex. So I think there is an opportunity for a thriving ecosystem as we move forward. And I am cautiously optimistic. As time has gone by, I feel like it's moving in the right direction. And I'm a glass half full guy anyway. So I feel like with technologies like generative AI and others, we will be able to actually speed up some of these innovations and be able to add more value.
Great, thank you. So we'll take one more, and then I just encourage you to scan the QR code in the event app, and you can connect with our esteemed speakers and moderator and ask questions, because a couple of you have got specific questions for those on the stage. Here's a good one. In a country where ROI on other assets or pension provident funds are available, how can annuities be attractive? Crypto assets are more exciting.
Great.
I guess I'll start if
You
that's
wanna
okay.
take that one?
It's a fascinating question actually, because I do side-by-sides in my client services, and I kid you not. So one conversation I was having, obviously in a side-by-side conversation when I was sitting with the customer service rep, was somebody who retired and who has genuine questions on how do I make sure that I take care of all these required minimum distributions and all that financial jargon we throw at people. How do I get lifetime income paycheck? How are you making sure that it is protected income and all that good stuff? The next caller comes, a doctor, 32-year-old, who wants to put all the money in crypto. I'm like, well, you're talking retirement, right? So this is obviously we've seen how the industry move back and forth on this, but it all comes down to risk, right? This is like retirement is such a, you don't want to think a lot about it, but when you need to think about it, you probably would be thinking every day about it. So it is such an important thing, but it is also the least understood. Like, I'm pretty sure like a lot of us here in this room probably don't understand what actual annuity product is in retirement, right? Wealth annuity is a very different product. So it comes down to the financial literacy. So I think my short answer would be, how do you make sure that in whichever industry you're in, how do you get that level of financial literacy? It's a lot of jargon, I kid you not. I've been in this industry now in TIA for 20 months, and that's a lot of learning. So thanks to ChatGPT, I learn faster now. But the point is, like, you get to some basic financial literacy, and I think things will actually start evolve from there. So I don't know if anybody wants to add.
Thank you. Any closing comments, Lisa, or anyone on the panel?
I was just going to thank Tech Mahindra for sponsoring this discussion and for being part of the panel. Thank all of the esteemed panelists. I mean, Dev, Russell, Shastri, having you all up on the stage really says a lot about the importance the industry and your organizations are placing on the future of life and annuity. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.